my name is Anya Anti. I'm a fine art conceptual photographer and storytelling photo artist. And in this mini 4 video series, I'm going to show you how to plan, conduct, and finalize a fine art conceptual photo shoot from start to finish and create a new artwork. In the previous videos, we talked about all things pre-production, inspiration, storytelling tools, and how to plan a shoot, and also production, behind the scenes from shooting a concept on location, setting the scene, and working with a model. And today I'll be talking about post-production, how to select images, color theory, composition, how I raw process my images, and edit them in Lightroom. One of the challenges I ran into while shooting was the super tight space around the bathtub setup. It was placed on a small raised platform higher than the rest of the studio floor, with a couple of steps leading to it. On top of that, it was partially divided by a semi-transparent plastic wall. So I had 3 options. First, I could use a wide-angle lens. But I'm not a fan of wide lenses. Look, the perspective they create, and how they distort the image. Plus, I don't even own one, so that was out of the question. The second option was to just simply step back to get a wider view. But that didn't work either, because the plastic wall was blocking part of the setup. So I went with the option 3. Take multiple images and stitch them together into one, kind of like a panorama. And that's what I did. I used an Apple box to get up to the model's level and shot the center of the setup first, then took additional images of the top and the bottom. I've done this before, so I knew exactly what I was doing. For me, it wasn't an issue. That's why you'll notice in the selected images that parts of the setup are cut off. And here are the additional photos of the top and the bottom of the setup to complete the scene. They will be stitched together later. Let's take a look at the images. These are the additional images of the setup, and these are the shots where I was trying to get the pose and model's facial expression that I needed. I don't like the shots where she looks directly into the camera. I like where she looks sideways, kind of like daydreaming. I also like the ones where her face is slightly tilted and where her eyes are wide open. So I will go with the image number 1110 as my main selection to work on and transform into the final artwork. And these are the additional shots with smoke bubbles and the haze machine. One thing that really helps tie everything together visually and create visually striking images is your use of color. To create a strong cohesive look, it's important to understand the basics of color theory. It helps you figure out how colors interact, how they make people feel, and how to mix and match them in a way that's visually appealing. A great tool to start with is the color wheel. It organizes colors into groups. Primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Secondary colors, green, orange, and purple, created by mixing primary colors. And tertiary colors, mixes of primary and secondary colors. The color wheel also helps to organize colors into color schemes. Color schemes are groups of colors that work well together and are visually pleasing, creating what's called color harmony. There are a few key types to know. Complementary colors. These are the colors directly opposite to each other on the color wheel, like red and green, orange and blue, or yellow and purple. They create a strong contrast and are super eye-catching. I personally love using complementary colors in my work. They always stand out. Analogous colors. These sit next to each other on the wheel, like blue and green, or red, orange, and yellow. These combinations are more subtle and harmonious. They are great when you want something softer and more cohesive without too much contrast. Triadic colors. These are evenly spaced around the color wheel, like red, blue, and yellow, or purple, orange, and teal. They are bold and energetic, and they work well when you want your photo to really pop with color, but still feel balanced. You can also use color to create contrast, which helps draw attention to specific areas of your image or create a certain mood. One of the most effective ways to do this is by playing with light versus dark tones, also known as value contrast. Placing a bright subject against a dark background, or vice versa, instantly makes it stand out and adds visual interest. Another powerful contrast is warm versus cool colors. By mixing these temperatures, like placing a warm-toned subject on a cool-toned environment, you can make your subject pop and add emotional depth to your image. These contrasts are subtle tools to help guide the viewer's eyes and shape the overall atmosphere of your photograph. I love incorporating cool tones into my work, especially shades of blue. I usually create this look by adjusting the color temperature and adding cooler tones through color grading. In Lightroom, I work with temperature and color grading panels, and in Photoshop, I use tools like curves, color balance, and gradient maps to tone the image and give it that cool, moody feel. You'll also notice a lot of earthy and muted tones in my photos. I naturally gravitate towards soft, desaturated colors and low contrast. I create this look mostly in post-production by lowering contrast using curves, expanding the dynamic range, and fine-tuning the overall palette through color grading. For this image, I'm going with cool muted tones. I'll shift the color temperature and use color grading to add a soft blue tone overall. While planning the shoot, I also aimed to create light versus dark value contrast by placing a white setup against the studio's dark wall. The orange paper boat wasn't a random choice. It's a bright, eye-catching color that stands out nicely against the dark background and also matches the model's hair. Plus, it helps me build a complementary color scheme of teal and orange. I plan to keep the orange vibrant while toning the dark walls into a deep teal for the color harmony. Now let's proceed into the Lightroom, where I'm going to raw process my images and do most of the color correction and color grading. Even though I've selected this image to turn into the final artwork, I'm still going to edit the entire set, just in case I need any extra elements or parts for compositing. And to open my images in Lightroom, I'm going to select them all and simply drag and drop in into the Lightroom open window. And click Import. And at the top of the collapsible menu, I'm going to the Develop mode. And here I'm going to choose my main select image and start to raw process it. On the left, I have my history panel where all the future editing steps are going to be recorded. And on the right, I have all my editing Lightroom menus. And I always start with the basic menu. Here in the basic menu, I'm going to make my image a bit cooler by moving the temperature slider slightly to the left. And I'm also going to move the tint slider also to the left to make the image a bit more green and less magenta. The image looks a bit too dark to me, so I'm going to increase the exposure. Then I'm going to expand the dynamic range of the image by moving the highlights to the left and reducing them, and moving the shadow slider to the right to increase and lighten up the shadows, like this. I'm going to skip whites, blacks, texture and clarity and only increase the dehaze by 5. And that's pretty much it what I do in the basic menu. In the tone curve, I'm going to go back to the RGB main curve by clicking on this white circle right here. And here in the tone curve, I'm going to create 2 points on the curve, one for the shadows and one for the highlights, or rather for the midtones right here. I'm going to pull up this point to lighten up the midtones. But this one I'm going to keep as it is to lock in the shadows. But then I'm going to pull up the black point and pull down the white point for the faded effect. And I'm going to take a look at the before and after by clicking this eyeball icon right here. So here's the before and after. Then I'm going to go to the red channel by clicking on this red circle right here and take the black point of the red channel and move it slightly to the right, to make the darkest parts of the image less red and more cyan. Then I'm going to proceed to the color mixer. I'm going to start by slightly lightening up the red's color and shift them to the right to make them warmer. I'm going to decrease the saturation of the orange and also increase its luminance by moving the slider to the right to make the skin tones of the model slightly brighter to stand out more against the dark background. Since I'm aiming towards the teal and orange color scheme, I'm going to reduce the saturation of yellows almost entirely and move the hue slider of the yellow to the left to make them warmer and also unify more with the orange colors. Same goes with the green color. Since I'm aiming towards the teal and orange color scheme, I'm going to kill the greens entirely and move their hue saturation to the right slightly to make them cooler. I'm also going to reduce the saturation of the aqua colors and move their hue slider to the right to make them more blue and less green. As I mentioned previously, I like muted earthy tones, so I'm also going to reduce the saturation of the blue. And to reduce any potential chromatic aberrations on the image, I'm going to reduce the saturation of the purples. Also shift its hue and luminance. And same with magenta, reduce its saturation. And here's the before and after. The image looks way too desaturated right now, but that's okay. I'm going to restore some of the saturation later in the camera calibration. For now, I'm going to proceed to the color grading. Here in the color grading, I'm going to choose highlights. And for the highlights, I'm going to choose this color, pale blue, with saturation 20 and blending 100. In the detail, I'm going to add a little bit of sharpening and reduce noise. In the lens correction, I'm going to enable the profile corrections. And here in the lens profile, I'm going to choose my camera and my lens. I'm going to skip transform, lens, blur, and effects and go straight to camera calibration, or just calibration. Here in the calibration, I'm going to move the tint slider of the shadows to the left to make them more green. I'm going to move the hue slider of the red channel to the right. Same for the green channel. But for the blue channel, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to move its hue slider to the left. And to restore some of the saturation on the image, I'm going to increase the saturation of the green channel by 60. And here's the before camera calibration and after. You can see how calibration made all the difference. It restored some of the saturation and made the paper boat and the model's skin and hair color really vibrant and pop. And one last thing I want to do for this image. I want to create some sort of a vignetting by darkening the left and right edges of the frame. And to do that, I'm going to the top menu of this editing section right here where the crop and remove is, and I'm going to select masking. And here I'm going to choose linear gradient, click and drag and create a gradient. And here in the gradient editing menu, I'm going to decrease the exposure by 0.30. And then I'm going to create another gradient by clicking this plus icon right here, create new mask, and create another linear gradient, but this time for the left side of the image. And also decrease the exposure. And here's before the masks and after. And here's before Lightroom edits and after. Now to edit the whole set, I need to synchronize all the images. To do that, I'm going to the bottom menu, this film strip right here, and I'm hitting Ctrl or Command A to select all the images. Instead of the previous button, I now have the synchronize button. So I click on it and then I click on check all and then synchronize. Now all the edits for this image are going to automatically be applied to the rest of the images of the whole set. These ones look okay, but these ones where the smoke bubbles look very bright and hazy. And that makes sense because I was using the smoke machine which created haze in the studio. So I'm going to fix that. First, I'm going to reset the exposure to 0 by double-clicking on the slider and make the image darker. And then the only thing that I'm going to do is increase the dehaze. And that's pretty much it. Now this image looks exactly like the first portion of the photo shoot. So I'm going to click back on this image, and with the Shift key, I'm going to select the rest of the set with the haze and the smoke bubbles and click Synchronize. Check all, synchronize, replace the masks. And that's it, the whole set is edited now. Now I'm going to select all the images again by hitting Ctrl or Command A, right click on my mouse and go to Export, Export with 3 dots. Normally, these are the settings that I export with. I export in TIFF, Adobe RGB color space, and 16 bits for the best quality. But these settings take a lot of computer resources, and for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to export the images in JPEGs. I usually put my exported images in the subfolder, so I'm going to name it JPEG. In the file settings, I'm going to choose file format as JPEG, color space as RGB. Make sure that my image won't be resized. and keep the resolution 300 pixels per inch. And that's it. I click export. When the export is done, I'm going back to my image browser. Here's my JPEG folder. And here are my files ready for further editing in Photoshop. And that's it for today. Let me know if you have any questions down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where I'll show you my editing process in Photoshop.